You're listening to the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast, the place to come for movie reviews, along with some extra fun talk about movie-related topics like box office and awards. You can find us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and basically any place else you can find podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter for even more content. If you like what we do, feel free to share us with your friends, like and leave feedback wherever you listen to us, and let us know what you think. Now, let's get on with the show. Ryan, another big movie opens this week. That's what, 2 big movies in 3 weeks? 2 weeks?
Something like that.
Something like that. The last one, of course, being Godzilla vs. Kong, but this one being a video game adaptation that a lot of people are really looking forward to, and that is the new Mortal Kombat. Now, the original Mortal Kombat left some game fans kind of nonplussed.
Well, more the second one, I think, than the first.
Well, yeah, the second one was pretty not good in a lot of ways.
That's kind of an understatement, but yes. I think we can confidently say the second Mortal Kombat film was not very good. But the first one was just kind of campy enough to make up for the fact that there was not a lot of spine ripping outing. Sure, well, and it was a different, yes. And if there was a complaint, it was that, was it PG-13?
Probably.
I don't recall, but, that was a completely different era as well for video game movies. That was kind of somewhat of the early stages, and maybe its success led to some other video game movies being made that might not have been made and maybe shouldn't have been made.
I don't know. I'd have to check the chronology on some of those adaptations to see who we can blame for what.
Yeah, well, I think Mortal Kombat kind of came out of nowhere. So
right,
I think we can comfortably say the Resident Evil series wouldn't exist without Mortal Kombat.
No, I pretty much agree with that.
But that's the past. Let's not talk about the past. Let's forget about the past.
Let's talk about the present. The present is directed by Simon McQuoid, and not a lot of big names in this, at least not names that jump out at me.
Well, some of the Asian actors are actually some pretty big names there.
Right.
As far as, but yes, as far as like Hollywood, there's no Tom Cruise or whatnot.
Right. So let's talk about that. I mean, okay, because let's right off the bat, let's just get it out of the way. This is not Citizen Kane.
Well, just look at the source material.
Exactly.
Mortal Kombat became a thing not because it was the best fighting game, but because it was the most violent fighting game. And that's kind of, its origins is more that. There's practically, I don't remember if there was a storyline in those early Mortal Kombat arcade games. I don't remember, or just simply didn't care.
Well, I'll be honest. As a kid, I didn't have arcade money.
Okay.
So even when this game came out, I wasn't necessarily a kid, but I didn't have money to just be dropping at an arcade. So I didn't play a lot.
Yeah. I did spend a fair amount of time in arcades. So I remember when Mortal Kombat came out.
Oh,
and I
remember the crowds. I remember walking by. I remember seeing it. I just didn't play it.
Yeah, well, I remember playing it and thinking, okay, this one's its gimmick is that it's exceptionally violent, and that was its selling point.
Yes,
there wasn't, and it's no secret that's kind of what it was. And it's kind of remained that way. That the game is notorious not because it's the best fighting game, but it's because it is the most brutal.
It used motion capture. It used people.
Yes.
So it was very lifelike, as as it could be.
Well, the irony there being, except for the blood and the gore and the guts and everything, none of that was particularly. I mean, once the fighting aspect of it, but once you got into a fatality, the real factor kind of faded away.
Right.
With the splurting of blood, which then became a thing in movies as well. But the digital blood. But there were aspects to it, but I think ultimately the reason why it became popular is partially because of the violence, but also because of the reaction to it. There was that. I think the whole rating board stuff sort of spiraled out of Mortal Kombat and similar games to that. So
yeah. So let's talk about it. So this is a video game movie. In terms of the violence in the video game, we get a pretty good translation.
Yes, I would almost say literal translation in some of the scenes. It's literally they have taken the fatality cut scenes or whatever from the video game and put them in a movie with modern technology that is able to make them as gruesome and more realistic than they've ever been before.
Right. And they grabbed all the cute little catchphrases.
Yes.
Kano wins, flawless victory, and get over here. So that's check for the Mortal Kombat fans on that one. They get their violence, they get those nods to the video game, all those little cute things that everyone loved. Let's talk about the fight scenes for a second, not necessarily the fatalities.
Okay.
Definite Eastern influence in a lot of the combat.
Yes, but a lot of Western filmmaking style.
Yes.
The way that it's actually shot.
Right.
We can elaborate on that later,
so the fighting styles, they're put together like, a lot of them, especially, okay, so let's talk. They put out the first 7 minutes.
Best 7 minutes of the film.
Okay. I'm not going to argue that. I'm going to try to fumble my way around it for a second. I did not watch it when they previewed it. They put the first 7 minutes out, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. And I didn't. And then I went in and I watched, and I was watching it, and I was like, oh crap, this is the part they put out. That opening sequence, that opening 7 minutes, that combat, that was so awesome to watch. That was just really, really well done. And you said the best 7 minutes. And yes, if the rest of the film had been that good, we would seriously be raving about this film.
Oh, this conversation would be a completely different conversation. And I think, obviously that's a little problematic. And the reason why I think that's more problematic than people might think is because we all went in with a certain level of expectation. And the moment that you give us something that doubles what we were expecting, and then you can't sustain it,
yeah,
that's trouble.
Right. Even the final battle, which is kind of a replay of the opening battle.
And I would say, and I think there's stuff in the end that it comes closer
right.
to what they did.
But even that's not as good.
No. And there's hints of, I think, a really, really great story here and there scattered in. It's almost as if they didn't. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be spoilerific, but someone ends up in hell basically, and yet we don't spend a lot of time with them in hell, or figure out the journey out of hell. I've always thought the journey out of hell would be a pretty darn interesting thing to watch. Whatever that requires of the particular person or whatnot. But yeah, I watched those first few minutes of the film and I was like, I might actually not just be entertained, I might be really into this. It's fairly cliche type stuff, family and, it's why do people fight to defend their family, and what do you do if you mess with the family they get in? Anyway, it's not like it was completely original stuff, but the way that it was handled was a lot more serious than I was expecting. There was a lot more, emotional substance to it than I was expecting. There was a coolness to what was going on. Some of the visual stuff was just kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go in another direction that pretty much was kind of the movie I thought I was going to get in the first place, but at that point, I'd been spoiled.
Yeah, they spoiled us with that first 7 minutes. It's still dark all the way through. There's there's no happy in the movie at all. But I did note when I left my comments afterwards, yes, it's darker and grittier than the original film, which is closer to the game, which is what people wanted. But you could feel the camp from the first film just kind of right under the surface. They would brush up against it, mostly with Kano, but they would brush up against it a couple of times, and they didn't go there, which is good because it would have ruined the dark and gritty feel that they were going for. But you could sense it. It's never really out front.
And I think the problem is that's innately in the game itself. A lot of the characters, and it was almost. I don't know a lot about the specific origins of the game. I've seen parts of documentaries that have been dedicated or whatnot, but it was never anything more than shock value, which has its own sort of camp to it. Grandstanding and over the top. There's nothing about Mortal Kombat that is restrained.
No.
And so I think that's, you run it, you can't do some of those crazy death scenes. You can't pull somebody's heart out. You can't do a lot of these things without a little bit of the campiness being there.
Right.
So I think they have to have that other. They do take it pretty seriously. I would say that they're never really, I guess there are a couple characters who are constantly cracking jokes and being silly, but for the most part, you kind of have to take it seriously, but you also have to acknowledge that goofiness.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit. You wanted to talk a little bit about the way it was shot.
Sure.
So go ahead and give us your thoughts on
it. So a lot of American Western filmmakers, when they do action scenes, it's all close-ups and quick cuts, because typically it's because they don't want to take the time, or the actors aren't talented enough to do the choreography. And there are, mostly in this film, I would say that they trusted in their stunt coordinators and did a lot of stuff where you could actually see what was going on. But there were numerous segments also where it was all the close-up chaotic. You don't get to see the artistry of what's happening, and I don't know if that's because certain members of the cast were able to do choreography,
right,
and others weren't simply able to do the choreography. But so while I would think they did a pretty good job of doing the combat, I do think that there are moments where it's unfortunately obvious that they had to rely on the chaos to get them through, or maybe as a director they don't understand that you like to see a fight and know what's going on rather than just have a lot of motion going in one direction. And that's I mean, a lot of times you'll see really good Eastern actors in action films where they're just not allowed to do what they're great at, which is fight, and it's the dance or sort of a thing. Anyway, but I thought they did a pretty good job for the most part. But there were definitely some parts where it's like, oh, that's too close. Like, we're way too tight. Pull the camera back 5 feet, or whatever, and let us see this. Because if the one thing Mortal Kombat was selling was that it was going to have some great fight sequences.
Yep.
And allow them to be great, and some of them I think actually were really quite good. But when you compare it to, I don't know, movies that people might have seen like The Raid or other things like that, where the choreography of the camera moves with the fight, so that the fight is always the focus, and there's no quick cutaways, or there's no, it allows.
It's a lot of long. I think of it as like long flowing shots.
Yes, that give it a sense of, realism maybe not, but a sense of real flow, and I don't know. It just there's an artistry to fights.
Yeah.
That this film occasionally gets right, but also occasionally misses the mark. But more than often I would be more. I'm more positive on what they did with the fights here than I have it on most Western films. So I think they did a decent job. But but to that extent, also if you compare what they did in this to say The Matrix, where the action, where the fighting is the central, and then they have all the effects spraying around them and everything. I don't know. But you can see the Western aspects that unfortunately get in the way occasionally on this one.
Yeah.
But I think also my biggest complaint with the film would be that, well, beyond the fact that it gave me a great opening and didn't go anywhere, is that we do have, and we run into this a lot in action films. We have actors who are great actors but don't really work in action movies. And then who are asked to be in action movies, and they might not fit their style of acting. And then we also have performers who are really good at the fight choreography, but the moment you ask them to say anything, you wish they hadn't.
Right.
And part of that too has to do with there's some really bad dialogue in this movie.
Yeah, I had noticed that, and if you're a good actor delivering bad dialogue, you can go, wow, that's bad dialogue. But if you can't tell the difference, it's like, it might be a set of bad acting and bad dialogue.
And there's moments where it's just like, okay, this is, and granted, they were trying to sneak in a lot of really bad dialogue from the video game. But even so, there were times where I was like, no, just cut, where it would be a long shot, and someone would still be talking. It's like, no, we don't need all this information. Like, you're just bogging this down because not even the story itself doesn't think any of this is important.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a spoiler, but I think that this is the strangest thing, that this is a Mortal Kombat movie, and yet they never actually have the Mortal Kombat tournament in this movie. That doesn't mean there isn't fighting.
Right.
But they never actually have what the movie is supposed to be about happen.
Right. Which is mildly problematic, and I had noticed that. They tried to kind of explain it away to turn it into this just series of random matches or matchups, but it doesn't.
It doesn't need to be that way. They overcomplicate the film,
right,
in ways that are mind-boggling to me, because it didn't do the film any favors. Like, there's a lot of, I guess, references to, world building, but the most world building that happens in this film is, after that initial 7 minutes, 4 or 5 lines appear on the screen to explain what's going on.
Yeah.
Because, well, if you were just watching the film or haven't played the video game, you would never know what in the world was going on. And I think that's a problem for this. I mean, you can at least set up. I think. I don't know. I mean, it's weird when I complain about a movie having way too much, being weighed down by its plot and its subplots and whatever. But I mean, Mortal Kombat is about a championship battle royale sort of thing. Where why change that?
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. They do set up one thing in this film. The sequel? Yes. Which I honestly, I had forgotten about that character until the end, and then I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that guy.
They hit that so hard. I mean, they do it. They overplay it in the conversation, and then just in case if you didn't pick up, they slide over to the poster of the individual.
Right, and I was just son of a.
It is. I mean, but it is so heavy-handed. Like, so I don't. I can't. There are parts of me that doesn't think this film is actually fan service because it doesn't seem to think that those people who are watching it know any of these references. Like, it's almost made like for people who I don't know. I mean, I don't. It's the weirdest thing to me because I would almost say it's all fan service, but then they don't trust
the fans that they're servicing.
Yes, so it's so bizarre to me. Like, there's all sorts of stuff in this film that just it doesn't make a lot of sense in the way that I don't know. I can't figure out what they were thinking as artists making this.
Yeah, I don't know, but that okay.
On this end,
go ahead.
I think there is, for what if you go in and you just want that gruesome video game experience, I think that's there. So it's also hard for me to say that this is a really bad movie because I think in a lot of ways it sets out and does exactly what it wants to do. It just sort of fails and falls apart when it tries to be more than that.
Yeah. I agree with that. Now, here's where we're probably going to differ. I think maybe we won't. I said this is a bigger popcorn movie than Godzilla vs. Kong. In that, if you just want to go see it, it's big, it's bright, it's loud, and just sit there with your big bucket of popcorn. And I think it's bigger in that way than Godzilla vs. Kong. And it's enjoyable.
Sure.
It's more nonsensical.
I mean, it's gobbledygook. It's violent gobbledygook.
It is.
Show me your birthmark. Well, it's not a birthmark. It's a, it's. I don't know. I think it depends. If you're not into ultraviolet, wacky stuff, like if you didn't play the video game, or there's things in this. It's just weird. There are certain things that are really cool in a video game because you don't have to explain how that guy ended up with metal arms or whatever.
Right.
And then to put yourself in a script where you have to explain or put yourself in a position where you feel like you need to explain how somebody became this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Yes. But yes, I think there are a lot of people, you get your popcorn, you get your drink, you sit down, 2 hours later, you get up and you leave the theater and you think, well, yeah, that had some, really bad lines and some really cool scenes, and then it just kind of fades into the ether. I mean, I don't think you're angry about the experience, but
no, it's just a check out, like a big, loud, colorful popcorn movie. But I was totally okay with that because I wasn't really expecting anything more than that. I think I was expecting a little more from Godzilla vs. Kong.
And see, I think I would have been, and I think a lot of the reviews, because it's been pretty negative to meddling. I do think its biggest mistake is to give us a different quality of film for those 7 minutes, and then hints and stuff at the end. Because if they hadn't, we wouldn't. I know I wouldn't have been so hard on it, or I wouldn't have, because my expectations would have been completely met. It is what it is. All right, go see it if you like it. But I think the problem for me is I want to see that other movie now.
I know, right? Where's the director's cut?
And
release the McCoy cut.
I think we have the director's cut, and maybe we need to get,
I don't know,
the other person's cut. But it just, I guess that's what's frustrating. Like, you suddenly see that they have these moments of actually something that's really, has some real emotion involvement to it. It has some real, because a lot of what it is just silly, goofy stuff. Yeah. And that's fine if it's all silly, goofy stuff. But the moment that you start the film off in a completely different kind of place, I think you're doing a disservice to the film that you made, simply because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wonder, and I'm going to think about the movie I would have made.
Based on that 7 minutes?
Based on that first 7 minutes. And it sure as hell isn't going to be a movie about a guy who has no connection to, doesn't have any connection to his past, who just likes to get beat up. I don't know, it's a completely different story. And that is unrecognizable to the one that we do get.
Yeah.
So.
No, like I said, I don't disagree. I just, like I said, I wasn't a hardcore aficionado of the game, so I could just enjoy it for what it was, understanding that it's not really much. I mean, so on its scale, it's pretty good. It should have been on a different scale. The scale of that first 7 minutes. I don't disagree with that at all. I don't disagree with that assessment at all. But overall, it is. They did what they wanted to do. I just don't think they wanted to do enough.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the problem.
And maybe, I think that maybe, I don't know, maybe they didn't understand but somebody had to know. You don't release the first 7 minutes of a film in the way that they did unless you see it as a really good marketing tool.
Well, do you want my cynical answer? As a marketing tool, it was great because everyone thought they were going to get 2 hours of that.
Yes.
So
so there's got to be someone somewhere recognized. Wait a minute. This actually has a certain, a higher ceiling than we thought it did.
Maybe by then it was too late.
Well, they probably was.
And so now they have to milk what they could. Because, I mean, as front-loaded as film releases are now, how do you do it? Well, you show the best parts. It's like putting stuff in trailers that isn't in the movie. But it looks good, so it'll get people to see the movie.
Ironically, they did not release, or at least I could not find, a Green Band trailer for this film. Huh. So I literally had to go and take a behind-the-scenes feature that had film footage in it and play that so I could talk about it on TV. Because, as far as the movie was never made for anyone who wasn't going to see an R-rated movie.
Right.
And so they didn't really bother to try and even promote it, and so it was kind of funny. I had to go back and say, guys, do not use the actual trailer. Let me use this, because if we use the trailer, the FCC,
we're going to get calls.
I'm not kidding, we are going to be lit up, and there are going to be lots of fines.
Yeah.
And that usually doesn't happen, or if it does, it's because of language, and I can just say, don't play the audio.
Right.
But this one, the trailers were so graphic and red band that I couldn't even show them on television.
Yeah, that's crazy.
An epic amount of trouble. Which, you know what, maybe I should have just said, screw it.
I watched. Poor Ron wasn't having a good time anyway. I don't know how he would have responded to the red band trailer.
No, Ron didn't really.
No. So, okay. So there you go. Mortal Kombat. If y'all out there want to just parse through what we just talked about and decide if that film is for you, knowing that the first 7 minutes do not match the rest of the movie.
But you know, look, if you wanted to see this movie and you wanted to see this movie simply for the violence and the over-the-topness, well, it's there. So it's hard for me to be too down on this film because it kind of did exactly what it set out to do. It's just that hint of it actually could have been a lot more. That is frustrating.
Yeah. So there you go, everyone. That is Mortal Kombat. Out now in theaters. I saw it in IMAX.
I did not.
And it is on HBO Max.
Yes.
So check it out. If you wanted to see it, you'll probably enjoy what you get. Maybe not as much as you wanted because of, again, that 7 minutes. So, but no, it's still, I said, it's just, as long as you don't mind the blood and the violence, it's just, like I said, it's just a fun movie for what it is. And I was okay with that. So,
and I will say this, I haven't played any of the games recently. It's been a while since I played them, but I still, like, there was, you know, I mean, everything, I got all the jokes. I got all the nods. So I have to assume that they've carried on a lot of these things from the original couple into, you know, the newer ones, but or at least this was a pretty good tribute to those early first games. I can't speak to the newer ones, but it was pretty dead on. Like when something would happen, it was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I, you know, how I thought that. Yeah, that looks exactly. Okay, yeah. The saw blade hat moment.
Oh.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can make it through the saw blade hat moment.
Yeah, it's a little Evil Dead-esque. Like I said, that's where we started getting a little close to the camp, but maybe not. So, more movies coming out soon. Yes, indeed they are. We are going to be talking soon about the finale of Falcon and Winter Soldier, which released its final episode today. Lots to talk about there.
Yeah, someone has to get to watch it first.
Yeah, one of us hasn't watched it yet. And there is a Michael B. Jordan film coming out on Amazon soon, based on some Tom Clancy material called Without Remorse, and we will be talking about that soon as well. And a little indie film from overseas that none of you have heard of yet, but we'll hear about it and we'll talk about it. It's going to be called Limbo, so watch for that as well. But until we get to those, everyone stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see everyone around. I'm Mark, that's Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
Take it
easy, everyone.